Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Meta Update for Guard. We're going to be talking about the weekend of October 25th and 26th. I'm, of course, Joshua Joshi Howard, and I do want to give a quick message before I start actually talking about the lists and everything that has happened over this last week. I'm sorry this is coming out a little bit later than a lot of you might be expecting, and a big reason for that is I had a really bad mental health day today. I've been living with depression for most of my adult life, and today was not a good day for that, unfortunately. So I'm going to try and get this out anyway. I'm recording this the evening of Monday, the 27th, and it'll probably go up around 11 in the morning Pacific time on the Tuesday, the 28th. I'm not in any danger of anything, so I appreciate those of you who have voiced concerns already. Unfortunately, this has been something that has been going on for most of my adult life, and today was unfortunately not good. So I appreciate any kind words. I probably won't respond to a lot of things if you guys do say things, but do know I will be reading it. So I do appreciate anything kind that you have to say. And if you're dealing with this kind of stuff as well, please understand I get it, and I hope you can reach out to those who are close to you before anything really bad happens. Today I was able to at least get out of bed, feed myself, bathe myself, and all that kind of stuff. So if you're having a tough time, just understand that you're not alone. There are people out there who do care. With all that said, though, let's go ahead and start talking about this weekend's lists. So to start off with, this was a really bad weekend for the Guard. This was the worst weekend I think I've ever seen for Guard. Do know that the numbers I'm showing currently up on screen might be a little bit different than other numbers you're seeing. I saw a thread on Reddit earlier today. I cataloged 45 players because I don't care how many people were at the event, really, just that it was 5 rounds. And Stat Check, I think, has like a slightly higher bar of at least 25 players. I don't have that, so if my numbers are a little bit different than the numbers you're seeing on other websites, that's a big reason why. Big thing here, this was a really tough weekend, like I said, so a couple of reasons for that. One, there were a lot of teams events this weekend, so it wasn't necessarily a lot of the strongest guard players coming out. We do have a fair number of lists to show you, but a lot of the stronger guard players that were playing this weekend were playing at teams events. They were not playing singles, so it's kind of a selection bias issue here. But the other big thing is this is the first time that we are the lowest winning faction in the entire edition. We are lower than agents for this past week. Do know, again, one weekend of data isn't really indicative of a whole lot, but it is kind of interesting to note that. A couple other interesting things that happened this weekend. We saw a little bit of an uptick of people trying to play variations of Recon. This last weekend, I saw like 3 or 4 people who were playing lists that were either like direct copies of what Nemo won LVO with, or very heavily inspired by them as well. None of them did particularly well. It was mostly 2 3s and 3 2s. So, and even some of the strongest players who were playing it this last weekend still were only getting 2 3s. So it just kind of goes to show it's a very powerful detachment, it's a very powerful playstyle, but you also need to be really good in order to pilot it. We also saw a big uptick in Hammer this last weekend, which was a bit surprising to me. It didn't do particularly well, but just something to kind of note. Most of this was, again, on Combined, and then Hammer, and then, yeah, that was about it. Anyway, let's go ahead and start taking a look at the first event. So the first thing to kind of note is I'm going to be doing this a little bit differently than I've done it in the past, where I can show you guys a little bit more clearly. Someone was asking about doing it for people who are watching on mobile. So if you're watching on mobile, this is for you guys. Numbers to take a look at along the top, of course, are, so we have the Coventry 40K 3-day, we have our event, the detachment being played, and then the player name. This one was Scott McCutcheon, went 7-1, and the number on the right is the most updated ELO that they have. And bigger number means that you are expected to be a stronger player. It means you have proven yourself to be a certain skill. One of the big things I've mentioned before when we talk about teams is 1600 is kind of my bar for, like, this is a proven good player. It's roughly equivalent to, if anybody plays League of Legends, it's 1600 is like equivalent to like Emerald these days, or like Upper Emerald. So if that's useful to you, cool. If not, it's roughly like top 5-ish% of players by the time you hit 1600. And by the time you hit 1700, you're in the top about like 2% of players. So that's like a Diamond League of Legends equivalent. Cool. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at the list that we brought this last weekend. For this first one, it was played at the Coventry 40K 3-day. It's worth noting that there was only actually one guard player who went to the Coventry 2-day. Almost every guard player was at the Coventry 3-day. And the best performing one was Scott McCutcheon, getting a 7-1, and I believe it was a 6th place overall. The list that Scott was bringing is reminiscent of some things that we've been seeing players like Gustavo and Nassim play in the past. There's a Cadian Castellan with the Death Mask of Olanius, Cadian Command Squad, one Catachan Command Squad with an Ogren Bodyguard, two Rogaldorn Commanders, one unit of 10 Cadians, one unit of 20 Cadians, two units of 10 Catachan. My expectation is that these are separate from the Catachan Command Squad. I don't really see that attached very often. Two Chimeras, two units of 6 Bulgrin, and then 3 units of Kazarkin. And this is just a list that basically uses one unit of Cadians to screen your home field, and the rest of this is just brawling for the midboard. One of the big things to note is because I believe this was played on the UKTC style of terrain, it is pretty different from GW. Bulgren are definitely a lot stronger over there than they are on GW terrain, simply because of how powerful and how close some of the big staging areas of UKTC really are. There's not a whole lot of new tech being shown off here by Scott. It is, at its core, still 2 Dorns, 2 units of 6 Bulgren, 3 units of Kazarkin, Chimeras, Catachan, Cadians. The most interesting thing is that this is probably the strongest example of people moving away from Ursula Creed and putting a Cadian Castellan in the unit instead for the power that it provides in terms of just strong Overwatch, as well as it's just a lot of OC with fallback and shoot. And because guard units tend to be so top heavy, by which I mean the last couple of models do most of the damage, and you have like, I think it's like 16 ablative wounds of just like las guns before you really take any meaningful hit to your damage output. This unit has started to see a little bit more play, and this is the strongest performance of it so far. Next, at the same event, we have Jerome Connolly. I think this is his 4th time, tying him for Patrick Greatbatch, who had 4 appearances on the June data slate. Jerome, I believe this is his 4th appearance, at least third, maybe 4th appearance on the September data slate. So, I mean, Jerome's been having a fantastic data slate, so good job to him. He went 6-2 at the Coventry 3-day. He had a Cadian Command Squad with Grand Strategist, Catachan Command Squad with an Ogren Bodyguard, just like we saw from Scott. 3 Rogaldorn Commanders, Gaunt's Ghost, 1 man of 10 Cadians, 3 10-mans of Catachan, 2 units of 5 Death Riders, 2 units of Kazarkin, and then 2 Liminar's Vanquishers. So this is where there's like a brawl really going on with Scott's list. You can still kind of brawl for the midboard with Jerome's list, but it has a lot more firepower. It relies a lot more on the fact that it has 3 Rogaldorn Commanders instead of the 2, which is more typical of a lot of combined lists. And then it has a lot of layers of things that your opponent has to get through. The 3 units of Catachan, 2 units of Death Riders, 2 units of Kazarkin, and the Vanquishers typically are oftentimes used to be relatively aggressive pieces that you can use to charge into things. Yeah, again, not a whole lot of new stuff being shown off here. Probably the most interesting thing is the fact that both of the top 2 placing guard lists did include both the Catachan Command Squad with the Ogren Bodyguard, and yeah, they both just had that. But Kazarkin, Rogaldorn Commanders, Liminar's Vanquishers, a lot of very standard stuff. Something a little bit more unusual coming out is what we saw Simon Evans, and I'm going to just double check to make sure that you guys can see. Yes. Okay, perfect. All right, going back. We're back in it, boys. Simon Evans, a player that I have not seen pop up before, so congratulations to Simon on the first time appearing on the spreadsheet and being immortalized there. Simon went 6-2 at the Coventry 3-day as well, with Gaunt's Ghost, 2 Rogaldorn Commanders, 2 Engine Seers, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 3 Chimeras, 2 units of 6 Bulgrin, 3 units of Kazarkin, 2 Scout Sentinels, and a Calidus Assassin. So this is fairly similar. The biggest departures here from this list that we see from a lot of other similar lists is the fact that it does have the 2 Engine Seers and the Calidus Assassin as a couple of ways to, make the first wave of Chimera is more difficult to kill, and then the Rogel Dorns, and then the Calidus Assassin also makes a lot of armies really sad if you have access to that Vect. I don't know what in particular Simon was trying to target with this, but it also makes a lot of your secondary scoring really easy when you have both Gonskos and the Calidus as well, and having the double Lone Op is interesting in terms of being able to hold some primary that you might not otherwise be able to. But other than that, not a whole lot of new stuff here either, so congrats to Simon on the 6-2. Okay, the first list that we have this weekend that is not actually going to be in, what do you call it? In combined arms is Luke Hustil, another player that I have not seen before, and a big reason for this is Luke does not have an ELO, so this is their first GT since the ELO system started, so probably a relatively new player to think I've seen. Welcome to Luke. He went 4-1 at the Orktoberfest 2025 with Hammer the Emperor. And this is a fairly interesting list coming out from Luke. He had the Lord Solar Leontis. This is a unit that you tend to see much more popular among newer players list because it does make the CP and like the yeah, in general, just the CP economy way easier when you have those guaranteed extra CP, and you don't need to discard relatively early on. However, it does put a pretty big hit in terms of your ability to just have like more stuff in the midboard. He has a Cadian Command Squad, a Rogaldorn Commander with the Veteran Crew, that's the reroll ones, I believe. Rogaldorn Commander with Indomitable Steed for the 6-up Feel No Pain. 2 Engine Seers as well. 1 unit of 20 Cadians. This is definitely pretty uncommon in terms of what you see at competitive or top level competitive hammer lists, but it still makes a lot of the same uses that you would see in a lot of other lists. You still have the ability to string out, screen your entire backfield, and it is a tool that you can use to just go touch the midboard if you really need to. It just doesn't have the like same survivability or extra tools that you would have in combined or bridgehead. That takes it to the next level, but it still does all the things that 20 Cadians would do. It has 1 unit of 3 Bulgren, 3 units of 5 Krieg Engineers, 1 Hellhound, and the most interesting single unit actually in this entire list is 1 Leman Russ Eradicator. This is the Leman Russ, I believe it's still 170 points, but it is whenever it is receiving the benefit of cover, it also gets -1 damage. And this was a unit that has basically seen almost no play since the Codex came out. There was a little bit of playing with it like right at the beginning, but a lot of people very quickly moved on to it. It just doesn't do enough damage, and it doesn't have the -1 damage against the melee units, which is one of the big reasons why that rule will be really interesting. Excuse me. And then he rounds it out with 3 Leman Russ Vanquishers. So this is fairly similar, again, to things that we've seen played by Nick Jagiello, is probably the biggest name in terms of piloting like piles of tanks in terms of hammer. The 2 Rogaldorns, 3 Vanquishers. The extra tank here where Nick tends to go with an Exterminator has been replaced by an Eradicator, and there's a little bit more just like there's different midboard nonsense in terms of instead of taking like units of horses that we see Nick take fairly often, it's 3 units of Krieg Engineers, 1 unit of 3 Bulgren, and then the 2 Engine Seers as well. So it's a lot less damage than a list that we oftentimes see from someone like Nick Jagiello. But it ends up playing a game plan pretty similar to the ones that you actually see played over in Combined. So well done to Luke on going for 1 at one of the first events that we've seen you play, and hopefully we see you pop up again. Next, the last singles list I have showing for you guys is Noah Bellew going 4-1 at the Battle Brothers GT. This is very normal looking stuff in a lot of ways. It's got 2 Rogaldorn Commanders, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 1 Chimera, 1 Taurox, 1 unit of 6 Bulgren, 2 units of 3 Ogren, 1 unit of Aquilons, a Hellhound, 1 Exterminator, 2 Vanquishers, and 2 Scout Sentinels. So this is honestly kind of reminiscent of a lot of things that Nick Jagiello was also playing during the Index, except back then it was a lot of just cheap stuff. Big fan of the Ogren in general, just because they are 60 points, they're toughness 6, and they have a 6-up Feel No Pain. They're kind of annoying to remove for a lot of armies that just don't have the tools to deal with it. The big thing that's interesting here is there's no ways for the Chimera or Taurox to receive Scout in this, so it's a not as fast as like versions of this that we've seen historically, but it does have a lot of damage coming out, and you still have that one unit of 6 Bulgrin to create a really big block in the midboard. I'm not generally a fan of one unit of 6 Bulgrin, but it's kind of made up for when you have the Hellhound and the 2 Vanquishers to also create a lot of space in the midboard. Um, Not a whole lot of new stuff here, just like same data sheets, different combination of them coming out from Noah. But congratulations to Noah on the 4-1 at the Battle Brothers. Next, we're going to start talking about teams. So we had 5 singles lists. The next 4 lists that we're going to show you are all teams events, and this is again, the criteria here I don't really care how you did, mostly just what the expectations of your strength as a player were beforehand. And I'm using that 1600 elo, which you can check on statcheck.com I think it's just /elo. And you can see where you're at. Chris Daly is one of the strongest guard players in the United States, elo of 1761, which puts him pretty solidly, I believe, in like the top, if not the top 1%, then just outside the top 1% in terms of guard players. Consistently does very well in the Atlanta, and at this one, Warzone LugCon Teams event, he was playing Combined Arms. This is a list that I think I've played against this list almost exactly in the past. It's got a Cadian command squad, one Rogaldorn commander with Grand Strategist, and a second Rogaldorn commander and Ursula Creed. And the 20 Cadians is one of the things that Chris Daly actually put me onto, just because it can go like touch your natural, or it can go touch like the middle, depending on the what do you call it? The matchup that you're actually playing. And having 20 bodies is a stat check that a lot of armies just can't deal with. He additionally has 2 units of 10 Catachan and 2 Chimeras. They're paired with 2 units of 3 Ogren, 5 Rough Riders, and Aquilons. And this is one of those things where if you are used to watching and you've been paying attention to the guard meta for a long time, something that Chris has been playing with for basically since the Index. This was the classic thing that we were just talking about with Noah. You take the Catachan, you put them in the Chimeras, they scout the Chimeras forward, and then on turn 1 or 2, sometimes 3, you hop the Catachan out in order to go either screen or take away your opponent's objective, and then at that point the Ogren hops in. And the big thing here is 2 Ogren hopping in. If you can get the Chimera such that it's shooting at targets within 9, that's 12 heavy bolter shots effectively coming out of the Chimera, and then if you have heavy bolters on it as well, that's 18 heavy bolter shots effectively, so it's almost a Stormlord worth of firepower coming out of a transport with some dudes inside. I believe Chris plays them with heavy flamers. But anyway, it's a very classic style that we've been using for a very large part of this edition, and is still making rounds here for Chris. Additionally, he has 1 Exterminator and 2 Vanquishers. I believe they all had plasma cannons as well. He really likes using them for that long-range shootout, and we'll talk about that in just a moment as well. And then 2 Scout Sentinels. So a lot of firepower, using the fact that he has really efficient skirmishing pieces and OC denial between the Catachan and the Ogren and the Chimeras in order to create space for the rest of his guns to just kill you. Very aggressive, or relatively steady, not super aggressive, but relatively steady, very battle line focused style of gameplay coming out from Chris, getting him all 5 wins. He ended up scoring 93 teams points over 5 rounds, meaning that I think his lowest score was like a 17. So he was scoring very, very well. I would expect this is probably a first defender list simply because of how many guns it has and how effectively it can play the midboard. Also at the same event, we had Giacomo Torelli, and Giacomo was a player that we did see, if not last week, then the week before, at a singles event where he, I believe, went 5-1. And this is, I think, pretty similar to what he was playing before, but it's a Cadian command squad, 2 Rogaldorn commanders, 1 Ursula Creed, a Scion command squad, Gaunt's Ghosts, 2 units of 10 Cadians, 1 unit of 10 Catachan, 2 Tauroxes, 2 Kazarkin, 1 5-man Krieg Engineers, 1 5-man unit of Tempestus Scions, a Hellhound, a Legionnaires Battle Tank, and 2 Scout Sentinels. This is pretty similar to a lot of ways that John Winter Russell, one of the top guard players who is going to be playing at the World Championships of Warhammer and got top 4 last year, it's got all the like the tools, right? You have a lot of skirmishing tools. You've got a lot of pieces just like take small, relatively isolated engagements up against your opponent, and you still have a lot of firepower in the backside. One of the interesting things about this is Giacomo was not being used in the same way that Chris was, and you can tell this partly by the fact that Chris went 5-0 and Giacomo went 2 wins, two losses, and one draw. And one of those losses was going up against Chris Daly, and it was on hidden supplies. And a big issue that Giacomo was having is he just did not have a way to deal with the 20 man. The 20 man was either always going to like pull itself out of the combat or like pull itself out of the line of fire, so you couldn't continue shooting at it. You would get one activation in it. There's nothing in this army that kills it in one activation. And then the other big thing is that it kind of loses, it doesn't have the same kind of just raw firepower that Chris Daly's list ends up having. It's a little bit more of a brawling list in terms of just like playing for the mid board. You have the extra Kazurkin coming through, you have the extra Hellhound, you have just like the Toroxes to deliver Kazurkin where they need to go. So it's a more mobile in terms of like what it can do on the board, but it doesn't have the same kind of dominance over primary as something like Chris Daly's list does. Two more lists to show you guys. One of them is Alpine Cup teams played by Moritz Jupe. It's probably Yoop, going 2-2-1, 2 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw. And this was with Bridgehead Strike, an army that we don't see very often in general, especially in teams. But it probably has more play in teams. But we'll talk about this list a little bit more. It's got a Kading Command Squad, Gaunt's Ghost, one Scion Command Squad with a Shroud Projector, two additional Scion Command Squads, one Ogrim Bodyguard. Looks like it's going with the Kading Command Squad. Two Rogaldorn Commanders, one unit of 10 Cadians, 2 units of 10 Catachan, 1 unit of 10 Scions, 2 additional units of 5 Scions, 1 Cyclops, 5 Ratlings, and then Canis Rex. And this is weird. I don't really know how else to describe it. This is a very odd list. It reminds me a little bit of what we were seeing Manuel Wietzerich with his Bridgehead Canis Rex builds, where he had like a lot of horses and he didn't actually have that many Scions. This is like a very odd stat check coming through because you do have the two Rogaldorns that are T12. You have Canis Rex, who's got the T11, 3 up, 5 up. But Canis Rex does a lot less damage now because he no longer crits on 5s like he did when Manuel was playing it. And he's just like, he doesn't have to feel no pain, he doesn't have access to the same kind of strats that you would have in a lot of your Imperial Knights detachments. So it's an interesting choice. I know a lot of Knights players are not even taking Canis Rex right now, so I was very surprised to see that it made its way into a Bridgehead Strike list. The other big thing about this is you got the 1 unit of Scion Command Squad with 10 Scions, and then you have 2 Scion Command Squads with 5 Scions. And if you watched my video not that long ago about playing Bridgehead Strike, one of the big things that I was a big proponent of is I think if you don't have 3 Scion Command Squads and then 3 10-man Scions, Bridgehead Strike doesn't really work. I'm also not a huge fan of Rogaldorn Commanders in Bridgehead Strike simply because that's like 30 guys that you could have instead. That's 2 units of Kazurkin and like an additional unit of guys or like a Scout Sentinel or something that you can add in on top of that. So it's really low unit count, and because of that, you're really relying on stat checking opponents who just can't deal with you. The problem is I'm not sure what list this is targeting, which is a big reason why it ends up going 2 wins, 2 losses, and a draw. And where like Chris Daly scored like 93 points over 5 games, and Giacomo scored like 41. Moritz only scored, I think it was like 40 points over the 5 games. So it seems like a list that's really hard to use in teams. I'm not really sure what it's targeting because typically you'd see this and you're going to like hunt after a bunch of MSU with your Scions. But you lose like the really big benefit of playing up against Eldari because suddenly their Fire Dragons actually have good targets to shoot at between your Rogaldorn Commanders and Canis Rex. So it's an interesting style. I think this looks to me more like a good player having fun than a super optimized list. We have one more list to show you guys this weekend. It is the Saffron Slam teams combined arms being piloted by Tom Moynihan. And Tom also got 5 wins and no losses, which tends to be more indicative of someone being first defender. You give them board choice, and then you just blow people up. He had 1 Cadian Command Squad, Gaunt's Ghost, 2 Rogaldorn Commanders with Ursula Creed, 1 10-man Cadians, 1 10-man Catachan, 1 20-man Krieg, 2 Toraxes, 2 Kazarkin, a Hellhound, 2 Lemurous Battle Tanks, and a Scout Sentinel. And this has like all the makings of a very good list for just playing on open boards. You have the double Rogaldorn Commander, you have the double Luminous Battle Tank. They will outshoot most opposing armies on their board choice. And also having that 20-man Krieg does mean that a lot of armies just it's just a unit that a lot of armies just don't have a good answer to, because if you can kill it, you're going to be trading down, and also because your combined arms of 20 Krieg can come back, and then they have to try to kill it again later, which is a tall ask for a lot of armies. But you also just have a lot of firepower. So if you do kill it, or whatever kills it is going to get immediately blown up afterwards. So there's a ton of tools coming through here for Tom, a lot of firepower coming out from this list, but otherwise not a whole lot of innovation coming out here either. Overall, like I said, there's not a ton of innovation happening in the guard space right now. Guard in general is suffering in a lot of ways, and one of the big things that we're seeing is outside of a small handful of top players with the faction, most of the guard players are kind of struggling. And we're also starting to see like a widespread kind of, I don't want to say full abandonment, but a lot of people who are on guard right now are looking to go play something else. I know a lot of guard players. So two of the classic examples, like Dave Gaylord on Asim Fouchain, they've both been on Raven Guard for a little while. I know David Gaylord was playing like Ultramarines Gladius for a while, and I know a bunch of other players I've talked to have like moved off to other things. Dom Maidlow is another player. Eric Hermosilla, they're all players who've like moved out of the faction right now, and I know other players, including myself, are already looking like, if I could be playing AdMech right now, I probably would, just because it does guard better in most ways that you can think of. So guard is definitely in a bit of a tough spot. Whether or not there's going to be any interesting innovations that we see taken to the World Championships of Warhammer in a couple of weeks is probably the next chapter of things, and also how real Gustavo's double Castlin, double Ogren Bodyguard style of list really is going to be. Anyway, let's go ahead. Put me back up. Anyway, thank you guys for watching this episode of the Meta Update, and we'll see you guys all next time. Bye bye.